You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to ThunderQuack Perfect 10. I am your host, Michael Cohen. Every episode, we dive deep with a special guest into a piece of pop culture they adore. Is it a 10 out of 10? Maybe. But to them, it's an undeniable masterpiece. So sit back, get comfy, and let's find some joy talking Marvel's Spider-Man with the illustrious Joe Hogan.
Hello.
Joe, welcome back once again. I mean, like, at this point, you're like, between you and Missy, like, you guys are my pretty standard co-hosts for Perfect 10. Because
I've
you
been
just
called
always,
worse.
yeah, you're always game for a good combo about some fun stuff. So, yeah, so you're back, and I hope that everybody's okay with that. I mean, like, it hasn't been that long since we talked about Final Fantasy 16. But here we are. We are now post strikes, and so we can talk about whatever we want, but we are gonna still talk about a video game right now, because I think you and I just, like, we both finished Marvel's Spider-Man 2 on the PS5, and it was like, listen, very similar to our experience, I think, with Final Fantasy 16. We've been so spoiled this year.
We really have.
It was just like, this is an instant entry, right? Like, along with the other two games in this franchise so far, and the DLC for the first Spider-Man. It's like, I don't know. For me, I was like, we should talk about this. I want to talk about the game, Spider-Man 2. I want to talk about the original one and Miles Morales, but I just want to talk about, like, how Insomniac has perfectly distilled what it is to tell a Spider-Man story. So I thought who better than you to break this down with. So I yeah. And anything you want to say before I jump into the intro description of Marvel's Spider-Man?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just gonna cut you off really quickly
Yeah.
before you bring it up, because you always bring up the really meaty good stuff, and then I usually feel like a stooge standing there like,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, really, I think you'll agree with me. The most important detail that these games included, all three of them, is the inclusion of the Ghostbusters firehouse on the map. Just
Yeah.
throwing that out there.
Yeah,
Just so
absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
facing the wrong direction, and the map is not quite perfect, but I appreciate that the effort is made. I appreciate that it's there, and I appreciate that there is a graffiti ghost on the back wall of
Yeah.
the firehouse. Good
You know
stuff.
what's so funny about it is that so Sony currently owns the Ghostbusters, right?
Right.
Like,
They could have the logo if they wanted.
yeah,
I
it,
think.
it must be a Marvel Disney
Right.
block. Like, they
Sure.
must be like, no, you can't put that in there. Like,
Yeah.
I am sure that they went to the extent that they went to, and it got as far as it did. Um, and then they were like, okay, we've got, like, Sony has signed off on the Ghostbusters being in, like having, like, the Ghostbusters firehouse in the game.
Mhm.
We just need to get Disney and Marvel to approve it, and Disney is probably like, no, we're not signing off on
Absolutely
one of
not.
our only franchise competitors, right?
Right.
Like, because Ghostbusters, I think, is one of the very few things, like, it's no different than Ninja Turtles, right? Like if the Ninja Turtles wanted to Ninja Turtles will cross over with DC, they'll cross over with the Ghostbusters, they'll cross over with the Power Rangers, but man, will the Ninja Turtles ever cross over with Marvel? No, Disney would never allow it, because the Ninja Turtles are like a main competitor with
Sure.
Marvel Comics and Star Wars and all of that for the hearts and minds of boys aged 18 to 13, right? So Sorry, 8 to 13. So yeah, like yeah, I think that that's the only thing that stops it from being like full on legit. Which would have been even better. But yeah, it is in all three of the games.
It is.
Um
Fun fact though, I actually meant to go back and check in the other games, but I noticed in this playthrough of Spider-Man 2 that where the location of Dana Barrett's Spook Central building should
yeah.
be, there's actually a very, very large building. It's not accurate to the film or real life. But there's a very large building made out of uh, assets that make the firehouse. So like
Mm,
the brick large windows. There's
yeah.
just this huge building made out of the firehouse textures, and it's really funny. So I don't know if it's on purpose, but it's like, oh, this feels deliberate.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure it is. Um Yeah, okay. Let's get into it.
Yes,
Let's
yes,
do
yes.
our description. So for those who don't know, what is Marvel's Spider-Man? Web slingers and true believers, today we're donning the iconic red and blue spandex as we dive into the spectacular world of not one but three incredible video game masterpieces. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Yes, for legal reasons we have to say Marvel's Spider-Man at the beginning. Uh, from the breathtaking skyline of New York City to the pulse pounding action of swinging between skyscrapers, these games redefine what it means to be a superhero. Join us as we explore the thrilling narrative, the jaw dropping graphics, and the sheer joy of swinging through the city like the wall crawler himself. So, whether you've played the games or watched your favorite streamer play through, get ready for a webtastic adventure as we embark on a perfect 10 journey through Marvel's Spider Man video game universe. Soon to be Marvel's Spider-Man and Wolverine video game universe. We'll
Oh
talk about
man.
that. We'll talk about that at the end. Um, these video games are sheer perfection. Like this is the thing. I know that single player games aren't for everyone, but I think if you're listening to Perfect 10, if you've been following me on podcasting for any amount of time, I think you'll have similar sensibilities. But I in terms of single player narrative story driven action adventure, it honestly, I don't think it gets better than these games. There are very few other franchises going right now that I think come this close. And I mean, like, we could talk about Zelda. We already have talked about Ocarina of Time. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are obviously masterpieces in their own right, but the thing that they lack, that I think this game does really well, is that narrative part of it, right? Like the Zelda games have awesome stories, but they're awesome stories that you kind of have to, like, you seek it out and you uncover little pieces of it.
Yeah.
And especially with those two that I just mentioned, they're very fractured. And it's sort of like, by the time that you've played the whole game, you have a picture of the whole thing, but you can actually end up getting the story in a non-linear manner with both of those. So to me, it's like, I love that about those games, but at the same time, um, it's not as cohesive or like sort of um cinematic as I would want it to be. On the flip side, you've got games like The Last of Us or Uncharted or Ghost of Tsushima, that have these incredible narratives. But then, like, especially with the Uncharted games and Last of Us, Tsushima's a little bit closer to Spider-Man, I think, because it's open world as well, and you're kind of in a little bit more control of the world. But with Uncharted and Last of Us, which I would put at the top of narrative, right? Um, a lot of the time you're just being funneled down a golden path, right? Like, there's a little
Right.
bit of exploration
Very
in Last of
linear.
Us 2,
Yeah.
but and a little bit in Uncharted 4, but for the most part, it's like, okay, you're kind of going down these set paths. Final Fantasy 16 was very much like that as well, which some people will call an RPG, and I think that we were pretty clear that it's much more of an action
Yeah.
adventure game than it
Yeah,
is an
for sure.
RPG, a true RPG. But yeah, but Marvel's Spider-Man from the get-go with the first one on the PS4 really went to great lengths to make sure that you had the best of sort of all three aspects. You had an incredible story, one of the best Spider-Man stories, full stop. Um, across all three of these games and the DLC, The City That Never Sleeps, right? And then you've got um, an incredible open world full of exploration and side quests and a million things to do. Um, and then on top of that, you've also just got like moment to moment gameplay that is so satisfying, that is so much fun to dive back into, that even when you go back to Miles Morales, you go back to Spider-Man 2, and nothing has really changed that much. There are tweaks and modifications as you go through. But much like the Arkham games, which I would sort of put as the precursor to these ones, I like that moment to moment gameplay is just so solid and fun. So for me, like I look at Marvel Spider-Man as a franchise as a whole, all of these entries that we've gotten so far, and I just like, for me, like, this is what video gaming is. Like, this is the peak of what I want. Right? Like, all of the franchises that I've mentioned in this opening are all franchises that I adore, right? And that if you took anything and you went, oh, we're going to do a similar thing. They took Star Wars, they did a similar thing with the Jedi games, right? And that's what I'm looking for when I boot up my PlayStation or my Switch. And I don't have an Xbox because I don't know why I would waste my money on it. Any of the good games are on the other ones.
Shots fired.
Yeah, I just have to always needle the Xbox fans out there. I know that there are a couple listening to this.
Both of
One
them
will
will
be
be
a
listening.
host on the next episode, so I hope that she listens to this
Oh,
before.
good.
But yeah, I like this is exactly 1000%, and yes, that is hyperbolic. It is 1000% what I'm looking for when I play video games. Uh, Joe, what's your sort of overall feeling on the Marvel Spider-Man franchise?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm in, in total agreement with you in that regard. I also really love how satisfying it is to progress in the game. Like the gameplay is
Mm-hmm.
amazing, the narrative is amazing, but like, man, I was getting that dopamine hit every time I found out there was a new costume I unlocked, and I
Yeah,
could go get that, and I was always excited to see what the new thing was and what new missions we're gonna unlock, and it was just I. It's also one of those games that, you know, open world games for me nowadays feel kind of exhausting unless
mm,
there's a reason for it, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Like, I feel like so many games over the last few years have been open world, and because of that, a lot of the stuff that's just kind of packed into it can feel like a little padded. Um, not by default, but like in general, when I hear a game is open world, where I used to be very excited, now I'm just kind of like, okay,
yeah,
is this going to feel empty, or is this going to feel like fun to traverse? But like Spider-Man through Spider-Man 2 have just been games that, like, not only is there a ton to do, there's a ton to see, but it's just fun to traverse. Like, web slinging is so much fun.
yeah,
And now in Spider-Man 2, web gliding is so much. New York City and even, you know, Queens and Brooklyn, where the buildings aren't as tall, is so fun to get around. But I can't tell you how many times that I would just take a break from the action just to kind of swing around and look at the environment and
yeah,
like, oh, I've never seen that before. Oh, let me explore, Brooklyn. Let's see, because like I live here. I'm a native New Yorker, so I'm very familiar with the five boroughs. So for me, it's fun to go around and see kind of how close they got it, and they've gotten it pretty close, man. Even though Staten Island isn't in the game, the Staten Island ferry is on the water and it's the right color and it's going in the right direction. So
yeah,
I'm just like little things like that just kind of help the immersion. I can't help but always appreciate that the attention to detail in these games goes beyond making the game fun and making the narrative strong.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
that's I can't say enough good things about these games in general. You know?
Yeah, one of my favorite things, when people talk about, the accuracy of New York and everything, is when they sort of come to the realization that the Statue of Liberty is actually very small
Yeah.
by comparison to the
Yep.
rest of Manhattan,
And not
right?
that close. I mean, it's
Yeah.
close, but not that close.
Yeah, because like we see it in a movie like X-Men or
Yeah.
Spider-Man No Way Home. No, yeah, No Way Home. No Way Home's the last one, right?
Yeah. Correct.
I and it's like, okay, we've got superheroes fighting on the Statue of Liberty, right? And then you see it like you've been swinging around and you've climbed up Avengers Tower or Oscorp Tower or whatever. Like there are these massive, massive buildings that stretch so high into the sky, and then you're sort of like especially in Spider-Man 2, because you can kind of go between, you can actually cross bridges in this game. um you kind of look and it's like, wait, where is the Statue of Liberty? And it takes a second to find it because it's actually so small by comparison,
They
but you
changed
can't get to it, so which is still kind of a bummer, but
in the Cloverfield film
yeah.
when the Cloverfield monster throws the head. Apparently, in the original trailer, people complained because they're like, "Why is the Statue of Liberty's head so small?" So they made it bigger in the film.
Just to, yeah, like
Yeah.
but like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, right? Where it's like is this what it's really like? No, but we had to make them look this way, otherwise people wouldn't care,
Right.
right? Like, yeah, it's so funny. Um yeah, let's get into the story of these
Yeah.
games.
Please.
So from here on out, I just wanna let people know, because I know not everybody has access to a PlayStation, a Sony console. I guess Spider-Man's on PC as well, right?
Yes.
And maybe Miles Morales is as well, and Spider-Man 2 will come to PC at some point as well. But I know not everybody has access to these games and to these stories, which is kind of like, to me, it's the fatal flaw of them, is that they are so exclusive to Sony. There's a reason for that, because Sony is so closely tied with Spider-Man, um but we are going to get into full spoilers, so if you want to experience these stories for yourself, I would say to, sort of, hold off on this one and go enjoy them. We're going to talk about all three games and the DLC for the first game, as we discuss this. Like, nothing's going to be off topic, I guess. Like, we're gonna get into all of it, and then at the end we're gonna speculate about what the next game will be, as well as Wolverine, which is, as far as we know, I think, in the shared universe. So,
I hope
um,
so. Oh man.
but it's gonna be full spoilers. So if you haven't enjoyed the story of these games yet, um, I would say go do it. Whether you can go play the game, or literally, like, there are playthroughs. I wouldn't just do a summary, because I don't think you're gonna get the impact in one of the summary videos that you would get by watching somebody do a playthrough. Yeah, we're gonna get into it. This is one of those things where I'm like, man, I really wish that I had the time to do, like, full, like, sort of story playthroughs of games like this for people, so
Mm.
that I could point people to that. But it's just not something that I've got the time for. When I'm playing through these games, a lot of the time it's like, it's very interrupted, and like I gotta play for 15 minutes and then jump off and that sort of thing. But maybe one day. Okay, let's get into it. Let's get into the story of the first game. I so It's funny. I watched a summary video this morning in preparation for this, because it's been a little while since I've done a full playthrough of the first game, and I've only done two playthroughs, I think, of Miles Morales. Um, I and I've only had the opportunity to play through the second game once, but
Mm.
that's still very fresh. So I didn't watch a summary video of that. But in watching the summary of the first game, it was really funny how much of the Martin Lee story I had actually sort of like glossed over in my head. There's sort of like the high points of it, of like, okay, I know that he's like the financial backer for Feast. He's responsible for Jefferson, for
Davis.
Miles's
Yeah.
father's death, right? And and he fights Spider-Man throughout the game. But I forgot how much he was, like, integral to the Doc Ock part of it, because I come away from that game so focused on the Doc Ock stuff, because I think it was
Oh
so
yeah.
strong.
Yeah.
that I forget about how much of the game is actually spent tracking Lee and going down that road, because I just think about all of the Doc Ock stuff. But obviously, like the Martin Lee stuff that is tied into Oscorp. The, this is what's so great about the story, right? It This game actually does what the Amazing Spider-Man movies tried to do so hard. And I think because by virtue of the fact that it gets to play with it a little bit more, like you have a lot longer to explore these things. They're able to do it more effectively than those movies did over those two films. But it does the same thing where it's like all roads lead back to Oscorp. In fact,
Mm.
it's never, I don't think it's ever fully stated in the game, but it is very heavily implied, especially through Miles's origin story, that the spider that made Peter Spider-Man came from Oscorp, right? Like
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I think there might even be like a an entry in one of the collectibles or whatever that's like that it was an Oscorp like it was an Oscorp demonstration that he was at, that the radioactive spider came from, right? But yeah, like so all roads lead back to Oscorp, which is great because they're really building towards the Green Goblin as one of the main villains, which we'll
Mm.
talk about. But but they did it in a way that, like, although everything is connected through Oscorp, not everything is Oscorp, right? So Oscorp gave Lee his powers through an experiment, but they now have nothing to do with what Martin Lee is doing, right?
Right.
So it's like that's separate. Um Octavius is like doing his own thing, but then Osborn comes in and shuts it down
Right.
effectively as the mayor, right? So like you get that connection there, and yeah, like it just and then obviously when we get into the later games,
They does
um,
I don't remember. Does law enforcement or does Oscorp seize his research?
I think
Because somebody does. I don't
it's
remember.
Oscorp. It's
Okay.
Oscorp because he like defaults on something or
Okay.
whatever, right? Like because they don't have any money. Yeah, because then it's like that's why Otto and Martin Lee team up, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then we get the great Sinister Six sort of remix with Martin Lee in there, and the reveal like sort of at the end of that first Sinister Six sequence with the prison breakout that
Mm.
that Doctor Octopus is. I hesitate to even call him Doc Ock because like I don't know that we really ever call him Doc Ock in the game, right? Like he's Otto because
Yeah.
he's so humanized. I mean, they
Yeah.
took what Spider-Man 2 did with that character and they just cranked it like they just kept turning the knob like 3 times around, right? Like 11 is an understatement on how well they did the Otto Octavius storyline. Um
I've never read Superior Spider-Man, which I know is a cardinal sin because
yeah,
everybody seems to
it's
praise it like
it is one of the best Spider-Man storylines
that's
of all
what
time.
everybody says, and I know
Yeah.
I have to read it, but like I think this is my favorite characterization of Otto, period. But
Yeah.
I also know that because I have not read that, maybe that would change when I do read Superior Spider-Man. That would
No,
change.
so here's the thing. Here's the thing. This version of Otto in this game owes so much to Dan Slott, who we have to give the shout
Oh,
out
cool.
to, because Dan Slott does not get the credit that he deserves for the last really like almost man like 15, 20 years of Spider-Man. Modern Spider-Man owes everything to Dan Slott. That is not an understatement. Like Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Verse, so much basically anything great post Civil War is Dan Slott.
Hmm.
And it's all getting adapted. It's all getting like pulled into stuff. Like so many of the things that are that inform all of these newer Spider-Man stories, even some of the spin-off stuff like this Madam Web movie that's coming out, is like they owe not even a lot, not even so much. They owe everything to Dan Slott, and the fact that he is not credited in the Spider-Verse movies, he's a special thanks in the Spider-Verse movies. His name should be up front, right? It is written by whoever wrote it. I can't remember who wrote the Spider-Verse movies, but it is like written by, and then underneath it should say based on a story, based on stories by Dan Slott, like based on the comic books by Dan Slott. Like Spider-Verse is I mean, he would be the first to admit that like he wrote that in a team, right? Because there are multiple books in both of the Spider-Verse comic events, right? But that core idea of Spider-Verse springs out of Superior Spider-Man, and so they owe so much to him. Um and this game I think owes a lot to him as well, because it's not just about specific story or plot or characterization. There is a style that Dan Slott brought to Spider-Man post Civil War, like post Brand New Day, that I think has become the modern sort of tone for the character,
Mhm.
in a way that like I would say that like the 90s Spider-Man cartoon series really set the tone for that era, in amongst, the Clone Saga and the video games and everything, and then what would become the Sam Raimi movies. I like that sort of like, I think that era, starting with Todd McFarlane and ending with the Raimi movies, um is all so informed by the Spider-Man animated series, right? That really like sort of becomes the overarching tone of Spider-Man. And then before that is like, like a sort of Spidey and His Amazing Friends sort of thing, or
Sure.
Spider-Man and His
Yeah.
Amazing Friends sort of tone. And then before that is like the 1960s cartoon show in the comics, right? I like Spider-Man has kind of had those chunks, and every once in a while you get a piece that like sort of draws from one or the other. Like Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, which is one of my favorite Spider-Man comic series, really draws on that um 70s and 80s era of like Spider-Man teen romance type stuff.
It was like
um
early 2000s, right? Am I
yeah,
remembering that correctly?
Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
like
Yeah.
it's firmly in the OC Smallville era.
Yeah.
And it's very much, it is Spider-Man Smallville, like that's exactly
Yeah.
what
It
it is,
was
which is
fun.
one of the
I
reasons why I
remember
love it.
liking it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, but anything sort of in this, there's a weird gap, I think, with the Amazing Spider-Man, with that era, like sort of in the public eye, of like them not really knowing what to do with the character. But then I think so much of what the characterization has been in the MCU is, even though age wise they're completely different, because Dan Slott's Spider-Man has been an adult the whole time. Um, that like even the MCU Spidey has been like tonally very informed by that. Ultimate Spider-Man I think also plays a big part, so I shouldn't put it all on Dan Slott, because I do think that the writers who did Ultimate, so like who do we have in there? We've got like Bendis, right? I think was one of the main ones on that. And obviously like when we get into Miles Morales and stuff like that, that's a lot of those, that Ultimate Spider-Man stuff as well. But like you kind of put those two things together. um Honestly, you put those two things together and that's how you get the story of these games. You like bringing Spider-Man into the modern era is something that Ultimate did, right? They did it really well. But then Dan Slott's writing on Spider-Man, like Dan Slott writes Peter Parker as an actual adult,
Mhm.
right? But maintains the important aspects of Peter as a person. But to me it's like, and that's what Superior ends up being all about. We're on such a wild tangent with Superior, but that's, which should be its own perfect 10 at some point. I maybe once you've read Superior we can come back into it.
Okay. Cool.
But I the whole when I heard they were doing Superior Spider-Man, I was like, this is the dumbest idea ever. Doc Ock transfers his mind into the body of Peter Parker and becomes Spider-Man, and Peter Parker's dead, right? For all intents and purposes. Like I was like, that's such a stupid idea. And then I don't know what it was that got me to start reading it, but I started reading it, and um the whole point is that is that seeing Doc Ock try to be Spider-Man, and he's got access to Peter's memories and stuff. Um, so he starts to be influenced by the experiences of Peter Parker and by the people who influenced Pete, and and that starts to inform him becoming Spider-Man, right?
Mhm.
And that that whole aspect of it, it just like it's like a breakdown of what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. So I'm really hoping, we're kind of jumping around now, because I'm really hoping that the next installment, if it were up to me, we'll get there because we'll talk about the other games, but if it were up to me, the next installment would be a small game like Miles Morales that is Superior Spider-Man.
Wow,
um
that'd be
and
cool.
you would just like, especially the way that Spider-Man 2 ends, is that like I would have that be like, that's Otto's big plan, and then when that fails, then Norman becomes the Green Goblin, right? Like takes it to the next step to get revenge
Mm.
on Spider-Man. But I yeah, it is such a, it's an examination of that character, which is why I say that, like, without Superior, I don't think that we get Otto as fully fleshed out and real as we do in this game. So bring it
Mm.
back into Marvel Spider-Man. Um, but it also, by juxtaposition, it throws who Spider-Man is as a character into such sharp relief. And Superior happened right in the lead up to Spider-Verse, right? Like that, like it's Superior, Spider-Verse, and then Parker Industries. That's sort of like the the which Parker Industries is one of my favorite Spider-Man stories as well. But um it like that's sort of the way it plays out in the comics. Um and so like the Spider-Verse movies, these video games, really having such a tight handle on who Peter Parker is, in a way that I feel like, as much as I love Homecoming and Far From Home, didn't quite nail. But then all of a sudden, No Way Home really gets it.
Mm.
Like No Way Home really gets it in the whole, like, we don't kill. Like, that Spider-Man doesn't kill his villains. And
Mm.
when MCU Peter realizes that all of these villains go back to their worlds to die, basically, he's like, oh well, that doesn't stand. Like I have to correct this, right?
Yeah.
That Peter is so firmly in this Peter that when we get to the Devil's Breath stuff, and then Aunt May gets infected, and then he has to make the choice at the end of the game, um I mean, like,
Brutal,
I
brutal scene.
I don't think there's a better Peter Parker moment in all of Spider-Man. I am not being hyperbolic. In
Wow.
my experience, and I am a diehard, hardcore Spider-Man fan, I haven't read every comic. I haven't experienced absolutely everything, but I mean, like, I have a very deep knowledge of this character and a wide breadth of experience with him. For me, that moment, in that, like, with her in the bed and like, take off your mask, I've known for a while,
Mm.
I didn't want you to worry, I did worry, like all of that. And then him being like, I don't know what to do, which is the core, like that is to me really like the core of Spider-Man, is that this is the Parker luck, right? Is that he is always stuck between the rock and the hard place. And Aunt May says to him, like, yeah, you do. Like, yes, you do know what to do. That actually is the core of the problem, is that Spider-Man does know what to do. Peter does know what to do because he was raised by these two incredible people, and that's why he's Spider-Man. It's exactly the same, and I really hope that James Gunn gets this when he, I mean, he's written his Superman movie and they're going to start filming it soon. But I really hope that he gets this. That is what makes Superman Superman. It is not a spider bite. It's not coming from Krypton. That's not what makes them heroes, right? Those are just powers. Villains can have those powers too. We see that constantly. That's actually kind of the point of the villains in both of those universes, right? Like, but especially with Spider-Man, so many of them get their powers the same way that Spider-Man gets his, and it always comes back to, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Mhm.
Like that is the core of it. So he does always know what to do, and he gets so close. He gets the vial right up to the IV, and he's about to stick it in, but he can't do it because he knows that if he does it, he won't be able to live with himself, because like he would be letting down the two people that made him the man that he is, right? Like, so I every single time I have ever experienced that scene, I have cried, including this morning. Including like right now as I'm talking about it, there are tears welling up in my eyes, because it is um Spider-Man is an important character, I think, in pop culture, but like I'm sure, Joe, you share a very similar feeling, because we tend to agree on this stuff very strongly. Spider-Man is important to me because as I live my life and I have to make decisions, I literally like live these moments in my head and go like like what would Spider-Man do? What would Superman do? What would Obi-Wan
Yeah, of
Kenobi
course.
do, right? Like that's these are the ways that I make decisions in my life. I think actually it's so funny because like I'm a huge nerd, but the rest of my family really isn't that that big into this stuff. My dad was, but not as much as me. I am, because my dad introduced me to this stuff. But there will be moments in my family where people are making decisions, and I will say to Crystal's like, I don't understand how I come from the same family as these people.
Yeah.
Like when people are like fighting or like being petty about stuff, or regular
Mhm.
family stuff. Um and then Crystal will often say, well, you were like, we've talked about it so many times that she's like, she totally gets it, that it's like you weren't raised, because I'm the youngest, right? So it's like you weren't raised by your parents as much as you were raised by the TV and comic books that they put in front of you, because it was like, oh, we got to go to a baseball tournament for Anthony, we got to go to a hockey tournament for Anthony, we got to do Special Olympic stuff for Chris. Like I was just dragged along to this stuff, and so it was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're gonna stop at the grocery store on the way, and I would walk over to the comic spinner and be like, can I get this? And they'd be like, yes, fine. Yes. If it'll keep you out of our hair for the next 4 hours, yes, get two comic books, right? Whatever. Um, and so like my morality, my moral compass literally comes from Spider-Man and Star Wars and Superman and the Ninja Turtles and all of that stuff. So add that with the ADHD, I have a very strong sense of justice as a result. but thankfully a pretty solid moral code to fall back on. Um, but like Spider-Man, I end up beating myself up a lot because it is hard to make the right decision. And so moments like that, I mean, like there is one in each of these games. But that first one with Aunt May is just, it is so heart-wrenching. I don't think it will ever not be emotional for me to watch it, play it, to think about it. It's so well done. And that's where I go like that's why I can say pretty firmly I think this is the best Spider-Man story that exists. It takes so much of what works for everything else and distills it like purely into a Spider-Man story.
Mhm.
I have such a hard time finding fault with it. Like there are some things that are like, okay, that's very video gamey. But and they kind of turn MJ into Lois Lane a little bit, which I don't hate, because I am a huge Superman fan as well. So the crossover of those two worlds is okay for me. And it works for who she is in this world in relation to Pete. But um, I think that's kind of by virtue of the fact that there haven't been that many strong characterizations of MJ over the years. I think that most of the time her characterization is pretty weak. That's not to say that there aren't. There are some really great MJ stories in the comics throughout the years, but I think that what we're used to in pop culture, the majority of our interaction with that character comes from the movies or cartoon series, and most of those are pretty much like she's Spider-Man's girlfriend.
Mm.
Um, so that to me is one of those places where it's like, okay, yeah, okay, give her something to do so that she can be in on the action, in on the the gameplay. Um, but yeah,
No,
the other thing that I would love for them to do is to do a game that is just all MJ, like just the
oh
whole thing
man,
is MJ, just
I
because
don't know how well that'll sell.
I know how much it would piss off the fanboys. But I just talked forever about the story of these games overall, I think, but mostly one.
Well, I
What's
have a
your
question. I have a
Yeah,
question
go
for
for it.
you. Okay, so regarding that MJ stuff, I'm sure anyone who's followed these games, especially
Hmm.
that first one, there's no secret that there are those MJ kind of stealth levels, and a lot
Yeah,
of people took issue with that because their argument was, and I understand where they're coming from, where you buy a Spider-Man game to be Spider-Man. You don't want to be normal person because if you want to be normal person, you could just go outside, right?
yeah,
Like you're a normal person in your everyday life. You want that um you want that those superheroes, you want those powers, you want that, unique spin on what it's like to be someone quote unquote greater than what you are, right? So I also understand the choice behind that where
yeah,
okay, well, we want to give MJ to do something. The best way to kind of move the story along is to play as her, and those, they served a purpose. I agree that they served a purpose. I don't have a problem if they were in it, but I was in the camp of people that was just kind of like, I don't really want, I want to be Spider-Man right now. I don't want to do this. I would
yeah,
rather be Spider-Man. And it was one of those things where if you continued the story, you wouldn't know until you were already doing it. Like you start the mission and now you're MJ. So it's not like you can be like, oh, well, I want to do these other things, and then I'll go do that MJ mission. Because there was no like indicator or anything like that.
yeah,
So that said, in Spider-Man 2, uh, the few MJ missions were, I would argue, even though still stealth, a little bit more action packed, and we're
yeah,
not so much about avoiding bad guys, but taking down bad guys in a different way.
yeah,
Do you feel that that was a measured response to the criticism on the original game? Do you feel like that's them catering to the fanboys who were just like, all up in arms about that
yeah.
different type of gameplay? Or do you feel like they, you know, it it felt like the natural progression where, okay, well, we did those stealth ones. Now let's amp it up a little bit in this one. What are your
Yeah.
feelings on that whole thing?
I think that Insomniac was in a really, really difficult position with responding to those criticisms
Mm,
um because in that first game, it is like that is one of the few bits that I think that you can give it flack for. Other than that, it is, I mean, like, I think all three installments have been 10 out of 10s,
mm,
right? Um, but if you can kind of pinpoint one weakness that that first game had, it was that those missions kind of threw off the pacing and the tone a little bit, right? Um, I think I think that you had also a lot of vitriolic fanboys who were like, I bought Spider-Man, not normal woman. What am I doing walking around in a museum or whatever, right?
right.
Like, but I think narratively for the story they work. I think that I do think it is important to have those breaks in the pace. I think it's difficult to actually control the pace of an open world game.
Sure. Yeah.
And so having them in there in the way that they were, I think, like to your point of like, and then I start a mission and it turns out that actually I'm MJ. It's like, well, I've just been doing like run around like collecting things for the last 45 minutes.
Mm,
And then I decided to start a story mission. I thought I was going to be Spider-Man and now I'm
Right.
doing this. It's like that.
Exactly.
So the argument for it being like a pacing thing, it's like, to me, it's like, well, it's like, you're not in control of the pacing of this game anyways.
Mhm.
So, yeah, but the response to it, I think, was the appropriate and thoughtful response that it required from the people who made legitimate criticism about it,
Mhm.
like what I just
Okay.
said, and that
No.
weren't just like, you know,
Yeah.
the
Women.
the chuds that are just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to play as a girl, and it's like, I'm sorry, every time I have the choice between a female or a male character model, I
I do too.
pick the female.
I
Like,
always do too.
I just always find that, like, aesthetically, like, let's talk, if we're talking about like an MMO or something like that,
Yeah. Get
right? It's
customizable
like,
character. Yeah.
just aesthetically, like, I like, that's what I'm gonna, I like their, it always ends up coming sounding sexist. It's like, well, I'd rather look at a cute girl. That's not what I mean. It's just like, I most of the time it's fantasy games. That's sort of what I'm thinking of, is
Mm.
like games where there's like armor and stuff. And the male armor is just like blocky, solid color, boring, right? But then like the female armor will often have like more interesting silhouettes and like just design elements to it. Um Although when I play Mass Effect, I play as box art male Shep, but
Oh, dude, Shep.
yeah, but I yeah, I mean, it's just like, I don't have a problem with playing as a female character. I love the Tomb Raider games. I mean, when in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Cassandra is probably the strongest character that franchise has. Um, so yeah, like, female characters do not bother me in the least, which I don't think would be surprising to any of our listeners. But yeah, like, those sequences in that first game are a little bit too slow. So them coming back and going, okay, we're not getting rid of them, right? I but we are going to give MJ a little bit more agency in this world.
Mm.
I think was the right call, because it was like, listen, these sequences aren't going anywhere. This is core to the identity of what Marvel's Spider-Man video games are, right? To the extent that we also get to play as Haley in Spider-Man 2, right? Which would be like the Miles counterpoint
Mm.
to MJ, right? To Peter's MJ. So like, they doubled down on it in the new game. Um but in both instances, they gave us stuff that made it worthwhile, right? Like, having using the Miles Morales side story plot point that Pete and MJ went to Simcaria to basically to like help Silver Sable, because that's what they did, right? It's like, oh, I'm going over there. Like, when he tells Miles, he's like, oh, I'm going over there to be the photographer for MJ as she reports on what's happening in Simcaria. And it's like, yeah, they got into stuff. That they got
Yeah.
into it, and that Spider-Man helped Silver Sable take down somebody, right? Like, I but having the sort of like that plot line come back in this game and have her be like, so she's got one of their stun guns and she's been trained, right? Like, she's got a
Yeah.
little bit of self-defense training, and it's like, yeah, perfect. Like, if you're going to be in this world, then you better be prepared to be in this world, right?
Mm.
Such a perfect way of doing it. And then along those same lines, to play as Haley and to experience the world from her perspective as a hearing impaired person, right? Like, pulling the sound completely out and really just like, it only comes through the controller every once in a while.
Mm.
um it just like, it puts you into that, and giving you a little bit of Jet Set Radio graffiti mini game along with it, is like, yeah, like, this is great. And that mission is a side mission. Like, it's a um not part of the story, but is part of the, like, one of the sort of like side quests, right?
Mm.
So I think like that was also a good call, is that like, this is an optional thing. You don't have to do it. um if you just want to mainline the story, you can do that, right? But but getting the opportunity to experience that character's perspective, I think is so great, and such a wonderful way of utilizing the platform that they have with one of the biggest video game franchises out right now. And just yeah, give people just a little tiny, just a little tiny taste of a perspective that's not their own. Because to me, that's what video games are for, right? Like I want to go pretend to be Spider-Man. I want to pretend to be Link. I want to pretend to be Clive, whoever, right? Like I want to live in the worlds that they live in, because this world sucks. I But like taking that and using that as an opportunity to be like, this is how a hearing impaired person experiences the world, I think is such a great. I don't see how they couldn't take that opportunity. Like I think they wouldn't be true to themselves, and the inclusivity of that character, if that weren't part of it, right?
Mm.
And it also, like, to me, so importantly puts Haley on equal footing with MJ, as she is as important in Miles's life as Gwen or MJ or Felicia ever were in Peter's, right? So um yeah, I think that they handled it all perfectly, from game to game, and addressing it. I mean, like, there wasn't very much of it in Miles Morales, right? But the
Yeah,
Miles Morales game is
yeah.
so much more condensed.
It was very
So
short. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I think that it was smart, and I think that you do need that time with MJ, because we do need to live her perspective of Pete with the symbiote, right?
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
so important. It's so important to see her perspective on what is happening to Peter, so that we're not just in Pete's shoes, because I think it's really easy when you're just in Pete's shoes, and um it's a video game, so you're experiencing that power that he has when he has the symbiote. To be like, I don't understand what the problem is with this. I like it, right? Like I think there are a lot of people that actually would just, it's like Anakin stuff, where it's like you get people identifying with Anakin for the wrong reasons sometimes. And then there's like, oh, I'm a Darth Vader fan, and it's like, you're a Darth Vader fan? You're a Darth Vader fan. Okay, says a lot about you. Um it's like, I love Darth Vader as a villain. I am not a Darth Vader fan. Um but when people are like, "Oh, yeah, I'm a fan of Anakin Skywalker." It's like, in what way? What way do you mean that you're a fan of Anakin Skywalker?
Clone
Right?
Wars. He's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Um so yeah, I think that, like, a lot of those people who have the wrong perspectives on things, who do horrible things in the real world, and then see themselves in the heroes of these pop culture stories. I think it's important for them to see that power is not something that should be embraced in the way that the symbiote suit wants Pete to embrace it,
Right.
right? And that's actually something to it's something to fear, and it's something to be careful of, right? And yeah, getting Miles and MJ's perspectives plays that story out so well.
Mm.
So now we've transitioned into Spider-Man 2 territory a little bit, but
A little
that's okay.
bit.
Um yeah, let's we've talked so much about Pete. I want to talk about Miles. What for you, like, what was your previous experience with Miles as a character before playing the games?
So I mean, before Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man, whatever we're called, Spider-Man
Hmm.
1. Um my favorite iteration of Spider-Man was Ultimate Spider-Man.
Okay.
So I had read Miles from the beginning. Like, I was very familiar with him right when he came out.
Yeah.
That Peter Parker dies, and I was very upset because even at the time, that was my favorite Spider-Man. So I was upset that they killed him. I was upset that it seemed like at the time it was sticking, and then it didn't, but it kind of did later. I don't know. But I was upset that they were bringing in this new character who was not Peter Parker, who is now going to be called Spider-Man. I was like,
Yeah.
that's stupid. Bring in a new character, that's fine. give him spider powers. That's fine. Make the spider powers a little bit different. That's fine. He's not Spider Man. Peter Parker's Spider Man. This is dumb. So I went into that with the notion of like, I feel like I'm not going to like this character just because it's not Peter.
Hmm.
That comic series is so good.
Yeah.
He's such a great character.
Yeah.
Such a great story. So many great spins on, the uh, what was it? What are they called in Spider Verse? The canon event, the of
Yeah.
like
Yeah. The
all of
canon
the
events. Yeah.
line of tragedies that has to happen in a Spider Man's life.
Yeah.
I thought that stuff was so great, and I remember being so angry before reading it, and then reading it and being like, "Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, this is cool." I was still very sad that Peter was gone. Um, and then, like I said, they do bring him back, but then they get rid of him again, and then Miles survived. I'm actually kind of fuzzy on it because I did fall off after a while. I think that Ultimate Miles gets drawn into the 616 universe, right? But then like most people in the Ultimate Universe die because universes are getting imploded or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
it
something
was
like
I
that. I don't know.
think it was Secret War, like
Okay.
the more recent one that they did, that like by the end of it, um because in Secret War, I can't remember the character that does it, but somebody like brings together pieces of the different universes from across
Yeah.
the multiverse, right? Like the different what ifs and stuff. And the fallout of that was that like when the dust settled and the 616 was put back to normal, Miles was there.
Yeah.
And I think the only ones who know where Miles originally came from are Pete and Miles. Like I
Mhm.
think like
Well,
and maybe like a couple of other like sort of like Beyonder type
because
characters or
they
whatever,
had
right?
already known each other because there was that
Yeah.
Spider-Man story
Yeah.
before all that stuff
Yeah.
where I think Miles came to 616 anyway, right? Not the other
Yeah.
way around. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. There's like
Um
I never read that one, but yeah,
it's
like
really
there was
good.
like a
It's
team up.
really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so what about you? What was your
Um so like real experience with Miles Morales would have probably been um the Marvel Spider-Man cartoon series that brings
Oh,
him
okay.
in. Like that was probably the first time that I really like, cuz I never really read Ultimate.
Mm,
Um I read some of the other books in the Ultimate universe. Like I read Ultimate X-Men. I read like the first 2 volumes of that. And I love the Ultimates and Ultimate Iron Man from that universe.
mm,
I really enjoyed those back in the day. But I never really got into the Ultimate Spider-Man stuff. Um, so when he came around in the comics, it was just like so far off my radar. I wasn't really reading a lot of Marvel at that time, anyways.
okay.
Um, I was mostly into DC during that era, um, and then like more like indie stuff. So, yeah, Marvel was kind of falling by the wayside, particularly Spider-Man. I but But yeah, then I think that cartoon series, which I really like, I would have been one of the first times that I like really spent time with them. And then obviously Spider Verse, I think, is when we really get to know that character better.
Mhm.
And that's sort of like I think become the core of that character, of the characterization of Miles Morales. I I but then like really honestly, like this game is the Miles that I think I've spent the most time with,
Okay.
in terms of hours. But yeah, I read, uh there was a minute there where he was like him and Kamala and a couple of other characters were like they were the Avengers for a second, and I read
Oh, okay.
that. I read those comics because I was like, this is cool. Like it's like they are the Avengers. Like they're not like young Avengers or whatever. They're just the Avengers. But it was a lot of like the younger heroes and stuff, a lot of the newer heroes. So I read that for the first volume of that, but it was cool. It was a cool team, but it wasn't a great story. Like it didn't hook me, so I didn't stick around for very long. So yeah, I don't have a ton of experience with him in the comics other than Spider Verse, like the Spider Verse comic book series.
Okay.
I which I think all takes place like post him coming into the 616, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, yeah, or
Let me
maybe it doesn't. Maybe it. When does that happen?
I have no idea.
Man,
I honest
I'd have to
I
look
had
at it.
fallen off for a while, so I'm
Yeah.
very fuzzy on a lot of the
It's
timeline
so
stuff.
hard with the events because the events
Yeah.
sometimes so often happen like outside of the regular continuity. Like they don't. They're considered in the 616 continuity, but like battle world type stuff is so far removed from like the ongoing series most of the time that it's like
Mm.
where did that happen in relation to this? And they've done so many of them. It's just like yeah, it's impossible to keep it all square. But um
Let me ask you what your opinion is on that. I mean, I kind of touched on it a little bit that at the time to me it made sense that he would take the name Spider-Man because he was
yeah,
essentially taking up the mantle, right?
yeah,
But that was because Peter Parker was gone, so he was the new Spider-Man. Now we have, all of these different medias where Miles and Peter are existing in the same space, and Miles is also called Spider-Man.
yeah,
Uh, do you feel like that makes sense? Because he's his own character, and like we, the audience, can just call him Miles when we refer to, you know what I mean? Like, but
yeah,
in universe, it's almost like silly that they would call both of them Spider Man. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah,
Because I honestly still feel like he's his own character. He should have his own name, and not because of the way I felt when I first heard about it, more
yeah,
because it's like he deserves it. He deserves his own identity. He shouldn't have to be in Peter Parker's shadow. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like he deserves his own hero name.
Yeah, and like they've played with it a little bit from time to time. Like I think at one point somebody like referred to him as like Kid Arachnid or something like that, and it was like, but that's not
I
cool.
thought that was someone else.
Was that somebody else?
I think that was another character,
Okay.
if I'm
Uh,
remembering correctly.
they have sort of given him his own monikers from time to time. Like Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which is the Disney Junior TV
Hmm.
series. He is referred to as Spin. It's like
Oh,
it's
okay.
even like it's not even in the actual series itself. It's in like there are these like 3-minute shorts that play in between episodes on Disney Junior.
Hmm.
And there's one where I think it's the first one where they're all kind of like establishing themselves. And it's like, well, Pete is Spidey, right? Like in that universe, they just call him Spidey. He's not
Hmm.
like he is Spider-Man. They do like take a second to go like, well, we're both Spider-Man, even though they're children in this universe. Well, like I think they're like young teenagers, but they're voiced by small children. Um, so like they're both Spider-Man, but they call him. They're like, well, Pete will call Spidey. They always call him Pete. They never call him Peter. Like we'll call Spidey, and then Gwen is like this universe is funny because this universe is one where like all three of these characters just exist side by side and they
Hmm.
all have spider powers and there's no question of it because it's just for kids, right?
Yeah.
um I so she's like, well, I'm Ghost Spider, which is one of the monikers that she uses. She's
Right.
either, I mean, like colloquially outside of the comics we refer to her as Spider Gwen, right, a lot of
Right.
the
Yeah.
time. But in the actual universe that she's from, she just calls herself Spider Woman. But then
Oh, okay.
when she's teaming up with the others, like Web Warriors or whatever. I can't remember which team she's a part of. She's a part of one of the teams. Is she's Ghost Spider because there's
Right. I had
confusion
heard of
because of
Ghost
Jessica
before. Yeah.
Drew being Spider Woman.
Right.
There are
Yeah.
actually like 3 or 4 Spider
Yeah. There's a million
Womans,
of
but
them. So
but
many.
yeah, but because Jessica Drew is currently Spider Woman and so is she, it's like okay, she's Ghost Spider. That's sort of how we differentiate her.
Mm.
In Spidey and His Amazing Friends, Miles is Spin. They just call him Spin.
Okay.
Because he's like, check out this cool move that I can do, and he does a spin, and he's like, okay, so we're just gonna call you Spin. Um, but yeah, I like so I'm fine with it. I think it's totally okay for it to just be like, they're Spider-Man and they're Spider-Man. Like they're like I don't know. It's like, well, which Spider-Man are you talking about? Are you talking about the old Spider-Man or the new Spider-Man? It's like that's how quick the conversation has to be at any point in time. It's like, oh no, I'm talking about that newer Spider-Man, right?
Mm.
Um, yeah, to me it's fine. It's fine. I don't know. They can both have the Spider-Man moniker, and it's like, I think if you're in Brooklyn, you know that if you're talking about Spider-Man, you're probably talking about the one with the black and red costume. And if
Mm,
you're in, uptown, you're probably talking about the red and blue, right? But at the same time, it doesn't matter. They do the same thing, right? Like
true. Yeah.
they functionally serve the exact same purpose to any New Yorker, right? Um, so I think like that's sort of to me where it's like, yeah, that's fine. It's fine. It's not. They can both be Spider-Man.
Mm.
Um, yeah, yeah. I think the biggest thing is that it devalues Miles to say he's not the real Spider-Man, when in the Ultimate Universe he was the real Spider-Man. He took
Right.
over, right?
Right.
He took over for Peter. So I think
I
that's where that
for
comes from, right?
for me, it's not so much that, because like that's the thing. I love that character. I think that character
Yeah,
absolutely deserves a mantle of respect for himself. But
yeah,
for me, it's just like I wish it was easier to differentiate the two of them in
yeah,
universe. Because like
yeah,
for us, okay, Miles or Peter, easy. But we're not supposed to know that if we're Joe Schmo on the street. Um,
yeah.
so I don't know. It's such a weird little thing to nitpick, but it's just something that bothers me.
No, and I think that's fair. I think that it's probably a hang up for a bunch of people,
Mm.
but it also isn't something that like stops people from enjoying the
Oh
characters,
no,
right?
no, not at all.
So
But every
yeah,
time it happened in Spider-Man 2, that was like, ah, it
yeah,
would
yeah,
just
yeah.
bug me. Pun intended.
I think the Spider Verse movies handle it really well though, in the
Mm.
way that it's like, I especially like the first one. I we get that initial scene with when he's getting the kid's costume, and Stan is
Yeah,
like, it
sure.
it always fits
Yeah.
eventually. And the journey of him across that, of like from going from being Miles to being Spider-Man.
Mm.
And so
Sure.
by the end of it, the way that Gwen and Peter B are like, no, you're Spider-Man. Like
Mm.
you are now this universe's Spider-Man, in the same way that, that Peter, blonde Peter, was to that universe, right? So yeah, it's I think to me it's all in how it's handled, right? And the context of it that makes it work or not work. And I like it. I actually quite enjoy it in the comics, when every once in a while somebody will be talking and they'll be like Spider-Man, and then somebody else will be like, hold up, which Spider-Man are you talking about? And like that would happen in that Avengers series a bunch, where people like Spider-Man, and they're like, are you talking about like Spider-Man? Or are you talking about the kid Spider-Man? Right? It's they go back and forth a little bit for a second.
Mm.
So I don't know. I when the comics acknowledge it, I think it can be fun.
It's definitely fun to poke fun at it, but it almost, to me, feels like, well, they're not going to change it. They acknowledge that it's silly, but
Yeah,
it's like you have the power to change it if you want to. It doesn't need to be this thing, but I at least appreciate that they acknowledge that it can be confusing in universe. So small
yeah,
victories.
totally,
I'll take
totally.
it.
Um, so the just to talk about the story of Miles Morales, of that game for a second, because I think it informs so much of who he is in Spider-Man 2. And sort of, him having to go through the trials and tribulations, like every Spider-Man, like you're saying, like just like in the Ultimates universe, the end, or in Spider-Verse, it's like you got to go through these canon events, sort of thing. um and him having his own adventure, and becoming sort of the Spider-Man of Harlem, uh, uh and all of that. um I people criticize that game for being too short. I have absolutely no problem with it. First and foremost, like
Mm.
whatever, give me more of this universe at this quality, like at this level, and I'm happy. And you can price it at whatever you want, because I will pay it. You
Don't
make
say that.
40, you make
Don't
40
say
bucks,
that.
you can make it $120. It doesn't
don't
matter to me. I
don't
will
say
buy it.
that. It matters to me.
Okay.
There
Um, by hook or by crook, I'll find a way. Like, that's the
you
thing.
go.
I don't. Yeah. It is the price tag is inconsequential to me. I just need more of this story. Um, but yeah, like bringing in the Tinkerer in the way that they do and making it his friend, bringing in Genki, um, I as the sidekick, right? I think really like that gives Miles his own flavor.
Yeah, absolutely.
I that I think works really well for those games. Or like for I shouldn't say those games, for like the Miles part of this universe, right? It's like
Hmm.
when we're Miles, we're not on our own. We are working with Genki.
Hmm.
And then I like it in Spider-Man 2 how Genki kind of like crosses over a little bit into Peter's world, but not
Yeah.
entirely. Where it's like, but Pete did so much of it on his own, right?
Hmm.
Um, and like that kind of is actually like a part that sort of defines his character in this universe a little bit.
Hmm.
And to the point that like MJ and him like kind of have a conversation about it. Of
Hmm.
us like you don't have to be Spider-Man on your own, right? Like you have a team now. So like Miles getting powers by the end of it, and then coming into Spider-Man 2. Um, I love the transition of it. I love that we go from Spider-Man where it's like he's just a kid, but he's obviously like he's got the stuff to be a hero. We see all of that in Spider-Man. And then in Miles Morales, he gets the powers and then, learns to be a Spider-Man in his own
Hmm.
right. And goes through everything, and we get the awesome stuff with his uncle, with Prowler. Um that builds on that and gives him even more to to sort of, again, like you have to have those foils, right? Like that's a if you want to have a good Spider-Man story, you have to have those characters that have the same potential but make the other decision in order to like show us how important it is that Peter and Miles make the right decision, right?
Hmm.
um but
And
then yeah,
well,
go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
Oh, and I just and then just transitioning into Spider-Man 2, where Miles, like we're switching back and forth between the two characters, between Peter and Miles, constantly throughout the story. But each one has their own flavor, each one has their own thing. But by the end of it, it's like this, like they are a team. Like it's the
Yeah,
two of them, right?
yeah, absolutely. And then in Spider-Man 2, with the symbiote's influence, we see Peter start to make the wrong decisions, and
Mm-hmm.
because of how well Miles learned through both Peter and through his own, support system
Yeah.
to make the right decisions, he's able to bring Peter back.
That to me is what makes, man, this is I it's a good thing that this podcast doesn't have a massive audience, because when I say it's some of the things that I say, I know that like it would start like firestorms if I had more influence. So thank goodness that I don't, because what I'm about to say is going to be, I think, very controversial. This is the best symbiote storyline that has been told, and Miles being present for it is the reason why,
Mm,
right? Exactly what you just said. The fact that it's not Pete fighting off the symbiote by himself, it's not a bell tower that does it. It's not just a series of events, or like he just stands in a church and cries and then gets rid of the suit. But it is very, very literally Miles, and like it's sort of like this, there's a feedback loop of with great power comes great responsibility, of like Peter takes Miles under his wing, teaches him how to be Spider-Man, and then when Peter falls off the path, Miles comes back and teaches him how to be Spider-Man again, right? Like,
mm,
and pulls him out of that, and literally is like, because it's like Miles, he's got the venom strikes, right? Like the bioelectric stuff, which
mhm,
I like that in this universe they made that sort of like oh, actually, like the symbiote is weak to this,
mhm,
right? It's not as bad as the Sonic stuff. The Sonic stuff is like far and away more effective against the symbiote than the bioelectric, but it does give Miles an edge, it, so that he's not, punching above his weight class.
Right. Yeah.
And he's getting more and more powerful as the game goes on as well, right? So um yeah, like I was having a hard time fighting Peter in the suit until I remembered that Miles has these other abilities that
Yeah.
Peter
The
doesn't
Venom.
have. And then all of a sudden the fight like turned for me. I was like, "Oh, okay, so if I rely on the superpower, like if I rely on the special moves, like I can actually beat him pretty quickly."
Mhm.
Um but at the end of the day, it's Miles as a person, and he's going through his own struggle, right? The whole Martin Lee thing. um and we don't know, like, to put it into Star Wars terms, it's like which of these characters are falling to the dark side, right?
Mhm.
But because of everything that Peter has taught Miles, he is able to maintain that and stay true to his hero roots, right? And
All I could think of, and this will probably make you very happy because I
yeah.
hate The Last Jedi as a film,
Hmm.
is Yoda's line about "We are what they grow beyond,"
Hmm. Hmm.
where Peter
100%.
taught Miles so well
Yeah.
how to be Spider-Man that Miles is, I mean, this is probably controversial too. In that regard, becomes a stronger Spider-Man, and because of it, Peter is a
Yep.
better Spider-Man.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and then I mean, like, we go from that, Miles pulling him out of that, and then they kind of switch back to Peter as the focus of the story for a little bit. And then we find out that like the symbiote is still in him,
Mhm.
right? Even though he's gotten rid of the symbiote, like it was bonded with him for so long that like it's kind of permanently a part of him.
Mhm.
And then to have Miles and Martin Lee go inside Peter's psyche,
That was so awesome. It's trippy and awesome and weird
it's
and
so good.
silly, but it was awesome.
Yeah, it again, this is like, listen, this is very much influenced by Superior Spider-Man.
Okay.
Very, very much influenced by Superior Spider-Man. So, going in there and then like sort of like helping him take control of what remains of the symbiote and then him becoming anti-venom as a result
Mhm.
is just like, it's take the again, when I say that, like, the great thing about this franchise, about this iteration of the franchise, is that it takes everything from all of these different Spider-Man stories and it distills it into a pretty perfect Spider-Man story. Like, anti-venom is in the comics, like that's a thing in the comics, right?
Mhm.
And like, we haven't even talked about Harry being Venom in Spider-Man 2 yet, but like when Harry shows up for the first time with the symbiote as a hero, looking like Flash Thompson as as Venom, right? Which is where I hope we're going with the MCU Venom. Like, I don't want Eddie, right? And I don't want Harry. I because we don't really have a Harry in the MCU. I want it to be Flash in the MCU
Mhm.
that gets the symbiote, and becomes Venom, because I think that would be rad, as a new way to do it. But that's a total tangent. But when he shows up and it's that one, it's like they took so many of these elements from the comics over the years and then just like went, okay, we're gonna borrow this, we're gonna borrow that, we're gonna borrow this, we're gonna borrow that. But then in some instances where they like plus it, because like, listen, you and I have talked about this. And I think it's the reason why I ended up being like, we need to do a perfect 10, because we talked about it before the game even came out. The design of the symbiote suit, the black suit
Oh
in
man.
this video game,
It's so good.
now defines what the black suit needs to be going
It's
forward.
so
I
good.
like the way that it looks, like sort of like that insectoid alien look.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't understand how it took us so long to get here, but this is the right
Mm.
answer. This is where it was supposed to go. And then as you play the game and the suit bonds with him even more and he starts to look more like Venom, I was like, it's so genius. I feel so bad. So bad. This is what I said to you. I feel so bad for the MCU writers that have to now follow up this symbiote storyline and try and do as good a job as they
Yeah.
did in this game, because like it's going to be so difficult because they just won't have the time, right? That they'll have at most, I think, 2 movies to deal with it.
Mm.
um I really, really hope that the symbiote is like a long game thing that they've got planned for Spidey in the MCU. I would love to see him not even like get it until partway through Spidey 4, and then for him to have it all throughout until the end of Secret Wars,
Mm.
right? Like it, to me, it's almost like he almost kind of has to, and I want it to be a thing of like a very slow burn of him losing himself,
Mm.
instead of it being like, because I just like Spider-Man 3 is such a misfire with that storyline, because the thing is
Yup.
that when you look at the comic books, right, the original like classic symbiote storyline in the comic books takes place over years,
Mm.
right? Like he gets the black suit, we don't even know it's an alien for a while, right? Like it originally isn't. Originally it's just a suit, it's just a costume,
Mm.
it was just a redesign, just for fun, that people love so much that it stuck around for a long time and then got turned into this other thing, and then Todd McFarlane comes along and turns it into Venom, and like now the symbiote is so much bigger than it looms so large in the Spider-Man story.
Mm.
And people know it so well, they know it as well as they know, I think, the radioactive spider origin story, that like there I think that there's a bit of an inclination to just sort of like rush through it and get to Venom.
Mm.
And I would love to see him in that suit, in like he gets the suit by the end of the first movie of Spider-Man 4, this next trilogy, right? And then he's got it in the second one, and we start to see like the darkness coming out.
Mm.
And then he's got it in Secret Wars, and it gets really bad, and because he's with other superheroes, they're like, you're not acting like Spider-Man. And so then in the third of the trilogy, that like he gets rid of it, but that Flash gets it and becomes Venom.
Mm.
I think it would be super, super cool. Yeah, that's what I would like to see. That's what I would do if it were up to me, but it's not up to me. I have nothing to do with it. So I'll just be happy for what we get, as long as it's a good story. But
It was
that's what
good
I
in
would.
this. It was good in 2.
But I'm yeah, in this game, it's like it is so perfect. It is so perfectly executed. All of the Harry stuff. I mean, like him having the suit at first, um, and then it goes to Pete. Like he gives it to Pete to save him, and then is dying, and then it eventually goes back to him. When it goes back to him, it's got all of the now it's got the spider vibe, right? I like that, like after their first mission together, when they fist bump or whatever, right? And when they do, it kind of like sucks a little bit of the spider power out of
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
And he gets the logo, and it starts to stylize itself a little bit. It's like, oh, that's good foreshadowing. It's so well done. Because we like it's I think there's this element of like what I just said, of like the symbiote storyline is so well known
Yeah.
at this point, especially by our generation, having grown up with the cartoon series, that I think also does it really, really well, right?
Mm.
Um, like it's such a challenge to tell that story and keep us in suspense with it.
Mm.
Switching it up to Harry, I think, was a good choice. I think that was a really smart thing, and not like having to introduce Eddie and that dynamic, and in this world that doesn't really have the Daily Bugle and all of that stuff. And Eddie's kind of a I don't know, Eddie's kind of a weak character anyways, but um to have it tied directly to his best friend, and this whole storyline of the three of them, and the Coney Island stuff, and all of that. I mean, the reveal of it in the Coney Island thing. And the thing is that, like, if you've played the other 2 games going into this one, you already know that Harry has the symbiote, right? It's hinted at very heavily in the first game, if you're sort of collecting all of the collectibles and doing all of the side missions, and there's like the science experiments or whatever that Harry leaves around the city for Peter, right?
Mm.
For his foundation or whatever. Um and that like sort of the end of that in Norman's secret room or whatever, you sort of explore around and you see all of this stuff, and there's something in one of the chamber and you don't get to see it, but then at the end of Miles Morales I think we get to see it, right? Like
Yeah.
it opens up and we see that it's Harry inside there. um so it's like we already knew that it was going to be Harry with the symbiote, so it wasn't a
Mhm.
surprise that he was going to be Venom. But um yeah,
I w-
it
I
sorry,
was
go ahead.
I was really excited to see what the origin of the symbiote itself was going to be, because
Mhm.
we in the majority of Spider-Man media, it's an alien, you know,
Yeah,
living creature. But in Ultimate Spider-Man, it was basically this bio-organic suit that was created by Peter's and Eddie's dads.
yeah,
Um, they kind of co-engineered it, and it was essentially the way Eddie in the Ultimate Universe was looking at it. It was their, you know, their birthright, right? Like
yeah,
part of their parents, their dad's legacies, belong to both of them. And then Peter ends up taking it in the comics, and does Spider-Man stuff, eventually loses it. Eddie was pissed at him for taking the suit, and now he's bonded with that suit, and he was mad at Peter, and now the symbiote's made at Peter. So that's kind of how that came about. So in this game, I was like, oh, it's a bio thing. Like, it's not an alien this time. That's weird and kind of cool. And it was the same kind of thing. It was created in the comics. It was created to cure cancer. So people who were wearing it, it would destroy their cancer genes. So very similar in this story, that it was
yeah.
kind of debilitating the effects of Harry's illness. So once it's revealed later on, like, oh yeah, it is an alien that they were experimenting on, like with at Oscorp again. Everything goes back to Oscorp. Like, it was just like, oh my god, they did both. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
awesome. I
yeah,
was so floored by that. I loved it.
yeah. And to me, like that is the thing that defines this as a perfect 10, is exactly what you just broke down, which is that like that distillation of Ultimate Spider-Man, regular Spider-Man, animated Spider-Man, all of
Mhm.
it, even the bad stuff, right? Even some of Spider-Man 3, right, is in this. um because I find that like there's a great element of Spider-Man 3, and Tyler and I talk about this on our Perfect 10 April Fool's episode that we did, about Spider-Man 3. It's the opposite of a Perfect 10. I it like the symbiote makes Peter more aggressive, and it makes him a jerk, and it makes him a narcissist, right? Like it makes
Yeah,
him
yeah.
think that he's the coolest person in the room. But if you really like read between the lines, it's like it doesn't actually, like, the great thing is in Spider-Man in the 90s animated series, he gets the symbiote and he actually does become cooler, right? But that Peter Parker was actually kind of cool to begin with. Like, there was
Mm,
nothing like nerdy about that Peter Parker, right? But like I love the because like he kind of like dates Felicia for a second when he's
mm.
got the black suit, right? um because he gets the confidence to do it, and he's all like, I'm a cool guy, I got swagger now. But when he gets it in, when the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, who is the dorkiest Spider-Man of them all, when he gets it, it is not um it doesn't actually make him cool, it just makes him act the way that he thinks a cool person acts. So when he does the whole like jazz thing and
Yeah.
all of this stuff, and he's doing, and like if you actually pay attention to the world around him and not just him, if you pay attention to the way that people are reacting to him, everybody around him is like, this guy's a huge loser,
Yeah.
right?
Eye rolling and
Yeah, so it's
shaking their
actually
heads.
like Raimi actually did a really really good job with that. It's just not, it's not what we were expecting at the time.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things where it's like it's a little bit genius. I relate it a lot to Batman and Robin and Schwarzenegger's performance as Mr. Freeze. Where a lot of people don't like that Mr. Freeze. They're like, all of the puns and like the bat, like it's all terrible. And I'm like, actually, it's really, really clever writing from a certain perspective, because Mr. Freeze is not, he's not the Joker, right? He's not the Riddler or Two-Face. Like Two-Face is this intelligent guy that gets turned into like a maniac, right? By being disfigured, and has this split personality thing. I know it's technically called dissociative identity disorder nowadays, but what Two-Face has is split personality.
Mm.
Because he is not a real person. But yeah, like those characters all kind of like take on the like these accentuated aspects of their original personalities, right? And it's like, well, if Mr. Freeze was like a scientist in a lab trying to cure whatever, I don't remember if they made up a disease or if it was a real one or whatever,
McGregor
but
syndrome.
McGregor syndrome, right? Um, right, like he's a huge nerd,
Mm.
and then he becomes a supervillain. And when he becomes a supervillain, like he's gonna, all of the things that he says are gonna be the sort of things that a huge nerd would say. So he's like, welcome to the ice age, and then shoots them with ice. And it's
Welcome
like,
the dinosaurs, the ice age.
yeah, we'll kill the dinosaurs, the ice age. Yeah. It's like, that's the sort of thing that a huge nerd would say. That's not the sort of thing. Yeah, it's not the sort of thing that the Joker would say or that like Ra's al Ghul would say, right? But it is absolutely the sort of thing that like some dude who spent the majority of his life getting his PhD in a lab, it's what he would say. And it's weird that it's Arnold Schwarzenegger and that he's gigantic and muscular,
Right.
but it actually makes sense for the character of Mr. Freeze. It's just we're comparing it to the animated series Mr.
Mm.
Freeze, which is like the best version of that
Oh
character,
yeah, he's
right? So
terrifying.
yeah, like you want to you compare those two things, but whatever. Um yeah, like I look at that version of Spider-Man as that, and this version of Pete with the suit, he does like he makes bad jokes throughout the game.
Mm.
And then when he's got the suit, he still makes bad jokes. They're just mean.
Yeah.
Like he just goes to like a really like vindictive, spiteful place. So he'll say things and it's like, but it's really, I love how they like keep it like true to the version of Peter that they've created. And like they double down on the dad jokes in Spider-Man 2 to, I think, to differentiate him from Miles, cuz Miles
Mm.
has quips as well, but Miles' quips are a little bit more clever, and Peter's are a little bit more like he's like, I think just to show that he's older, right?
Yeah.
And he's getting into like there's a little bit of Peter B. Parker that finds
Yeah.
its way into Pete in Spider-Man 2, which I look at as an evolution of that character. And I think that like where we're going with this storyline, if this storyline continued forever, I think that that version of Pete would end up so close to Peter B. Parker
Mm.
in in that like this Peter and MJ are going to get married, they are going to have a kid, and that kid is going to be Mayday, and Peter is going to be Spider Dad. Like that, the Yuri Lowenthal Peter is destined for that outcome. Like
Mm.
that's, he's all, we already get to see it with Miles, is that like in that he's like, and he's it's more of a big brother role, right? Like it's like he's a mentor, he's a he's more of an older brother figure, even more than he is like an uncle, because like we have Prowler in this, whose characterization in this is also my favorite characterization of Prowler. Like that, to me, like that's where so much of this ends up being that like this is my perfect Spider-Man world, because like these characterizations are just so perfect, and everything that you wish that they would have done in this one or that one or whatever they have done in this one, where it's like, yeah, he was Prowler, he was a villain, he was a criminal in Miles Morales, he was working with Roxxon, he was on the wrong side of things, but then Miles influences him, he ends up turning himself in order to stop Roxxon, right, and goes to jail, and then in this game he's reformed
Mm-hmm.
to the extent that like he gets to come home,
Yeah.
like, and so like here's the thing, I'm getting emotional talking about it because I love it so much, it makes me so happy that they went this route. I'm going to reference a lot of Wit and Folly and What the Force, because Ty and MC are so good at talking about this stuff. And I only know it as well as I do because those two incredibly intelligent women have taught me so well. But the whole point of a hero's journey is that you like the hero goes on the journey and they get the elixir and then they bring it back. They bring it back to the village and they share that knowledge with everyone so that everyone grows, not just the hero, right? They
Mm.
don't keep it to themselves. And Miles goes through everything that he goes through in his own game, and he shares that elixir with his uncle. And so the Prowler shows up in this game not as a villain or an antagonist or even as a distraction, but as a hero and an aid.
Mhm.
But like, we get to see him return to his family, and the three of them come together at that point in the game, when you find out that like he's moving in
Right.
upstairs,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, to me, it's like that. It's just it's so many of our stories right now are bleak and dystopian, and just, like, the bad guys always win, because I think we're living in a world where that's true, right? Where we turn around and people like Donald Trump can become president and break the law and seem to just get away with it.
Mm.
Well, let's hope that that's not the case by the end of this, but but it often feels that way, that like we see real villains doing evil in our world and we're completely powerless to do anything about it. I hate when I see it in my media. I
Mhm.
What I really need from escapism is a world where that doesn't happen, right? Either the villains are stopped and everybody sees them for what they are, which is where we're going with Norman Osborn, right? Who is the biggest villain in this entire series. He just hasn't gotten in trouble yet.
Mhm.
But it's going to be so good because his story is so relatable at this point. When he has his freak out at the end of the, like, he smashes the room, and Pete and MJ just get up and walk out.
Mm.
It's like, it's gonna make his turn as Goblin so much sweeter. Um, but to have Prowler redeemed, and not just redeemed, but like he's not redeemed and then sacrifices himself like he does in Spider-Verse, but that he actually gets to live that atonement first off by
Mhm.
helping Miles in this game. And yeah, it's in side quests, but like it is there if you play through all of the content. And by virtue of that, he gets to come back to his family, to his community, and now he's gone on his hero's journey and gets to share that with the community, right? Gets to share
Mhm.
that with the village. And it's like that, there's a satisfaction in that storytelling that you will never get from Kylo Ren dying at the end of Rise of Skywalker, right?
Mhm.
Um yeah, it just it's so much more satisfying to have Prowler now on the side where, like, in the next game, if he does decide to put on the gauntlets and do the thing, we know that it'll be as a good guy, right? um and we'll trust that because we've seen him go through that journey. I Yeah, I think that's so, it's just so expert the way that they've done that. And they've done that across the board with with a bunch of the characters, having them go on these full journeys, and really understanding what these things mean. And like Pete at the end of this game saying to Miles, "Is like, I'm gonna take a back seat," right? The way that they flip it, um, when Miles, I think it's in the first game, is like, "What's the play, coach?" Right? And then in Spider-Man 2, when they get to that point where it's like, "Okay, we're going into the end game here. This is it." And Pete turns to Miles and says, "What's the play, coach?" Like, he's like, because what you said earlier, when Miles saves Peter from the symbiote, he proves himself as a better Spider-Man than Spider-Man, right? Like,
Right.
he's like, and like that Last Jedi thing of like, we are what they grow beyond. It's the point. It's the purpose. If that
Mhm.
doesn't happen, then what's the point of Miles Morales, right?
Mhm.
Um as a character in a story, like, just don't include him then. If you just want Peter to be the center of the story and always be the best Spider-Man, then just leave him alone by himself. But it's so much more satisfying to have them together. It's so much more satisfying to see that evolution and to see the growth in Peter in that moment, not just in Miles, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that like, it greater together is the tagline of the second game of Spider-Man 2, right? And that's there's like the double entendre of it, right? Of like greater together. It's like Spider-Man is more powerful with the symbiote, but that's not what they're actually talking about. It's that
Mm.
it's the Spider-Men together, right? And but not even just them, because it's also MJ, it's also Haley, it's also Genki. Like it's that they have a team, right? Um, yeah. So obviously the next game is going to go Green Goblin as the big bad. I would really love to see a game in between, or maybe if it's DLC with Superior Spider-Man as the
Well,
story. But
do you think they would even do that? Because right now it seems. I mean, I know by Spider-Man 3, Peter will be back, but
Mhm.
it sounds like they're probably setting up either DLC or that smaller game where it's just going to be Miles again for a little while.
Yeah, I I think I think that what will happen is that like Miles will take the center, but that Peter will always be there. It's he's not, because I got the feeling that he's not leaving, right?
Mm,
But that he is leaving the city to Miles until he kind of says it. He's like until you need me, like until there's another threat,
right.
like city leveling threat, like I'm just like I need to focus on Peter for a minute, and that means that I have to leave Spider-Man on the side. But
Mm,
I am always here if you need me.
mm,
But the point of what Peter is saying at the end there is like, but you don't need me. Like I did this by myself for years, for 8
mm,
years, right? Now you can go do this. You are like Miles Morales Spider-Man is capable of taking care of the city, right? So
mm.
um, yeah, I could see the DLC kind of being a little like just Miles. Um, I think the DLC will be Carnage, and I don't know how you do Carnage without
Oh
involving Peter
man.
because like we haven't even talked
Oh
about
right.
Yuri, but like
That yeah. Right.
the
Yeah.
whole Yuri storyline from the first game through the DLC, and then she's not present in the Miles Morales stuff, but then coming back in this one as oh, what's her character's name?
Oh, I don't know. I just Yuri.
Oh,
We know
it's like
Yuri.
on the yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. But like she comes back as her vigilante persona.
She comes back as Batgirl.
Yeah. I and that all culminating in Cletus Cassidy getting his own
I
symbiote.
was not ready for that. That was awesome.
Yeah. Um yeah, like so I think that will be the DLC. I don't think
Okay,
that they're going to
cool.
save that uh uh for its own thing. But here's where like so I see Carnage as a really great villain to play against Superior Spider-Man. Like I think like
Oh.
if you were to do a smaller game like a Miles Morales type game, but flip it this time and it's you're just Peter, like that
Mhm.
Miles is maybe in the game but you don't play as him, and you just play as Pete, but that you're not Pete, that like Peter decides to sort of take his time and then is immediately interrupted by Doc Ock taking his body. Because if so the end of the first game, Doc Ock, he has McGregor syndrome, whatever he has. I can't really it's I think they just sort of like give him another made up disease, right? Um that he's sort of like at the end he's like they'll take my arms, and if they take the arms, then like the neural link was the only thing keeping that disease from basically like locking Otto inside his body, right?
Mhm.
And so if that disease progresses and Otto is locked inside his body, he knows that Peter is Spider-Man, and he knows what power that entails, right?
Mhm.
And so I just see like this is such a perfect setup for Superior, for him to be like, because in the comics Superior, the reason why he does it is because Ock has I think it's cancer, and he's dying from it, right? So he lures Spider-Man into a scenario where he can take over his body. Um And so I like if you started a game that was like that got Peter into that position and like and Otto does that, and then like we're playing through a whole like mini installment where we are Otto in Peter's body and nobody else knows, and it's like you have to sort of like watch everybody figure it out, but that your villain that you're put up against is Carnage, and Yuri, because she's already on that dark path. She's already like, I'm gonna like, she murdered people in the city that never sleeps, right? Like that was kind of the thing.
Yeah.
It's like oh, she's gone, like she's fallen to the dark side. I think the best way to bring her back is for Peter to join her, right? But for her to be like, wait a second, you're supposed to be the one keeping me from teetering off the edge here, and then for her to be the first one to realize something's not right.
Mm.
You're not Peter. And then for that to be her path back is realizing that Doc Ock has taken over Peter Parker's body, and
Okay.
and then she ends up being the one that saves him, but by virtue of that is saved by Peter in that whole. That's how I would tell that story, and I would put it all against Carnage wreaking havoc, because it's like, because in order for Superior to be a story, you have to have villains that are even worse than Dr. Octopus, right? Because
Okay.
what you have to have is you have to have Otto in a position where he's like, it's not that I'm a bad guy, it's that I see a way to perfect the world if only everyone would just do as I tell them, right?
Right.
Like that's, and like that's his villainous position, right? He's like, that's where comes out. He's like, I'm going to be the superior Spider-Man. I'm going to do the job that Spider-Man did, but I'm not going to make the same mistakes that he did, right? Like, I'm not going to have the weakness that he did. And then the journey of that is him discovering that what he perceives as Peter's weakness is actually what makes him a hero. It's what makes him Spider-Man, right? So the fun stuff in there is that he hires goons, right? Like he creates the spider bots and stuff, which are now like a Spider-Man staple. But that's actually something that comes from Superior, that that Doc Ock is like, I can't be in every place at once. Like this was Peter's problem, is that like he's always trying to be everywhere and everything to everyone. It's like, if I just build these robots, they can handle, like I can build robots that can handle a fire. Like a Spider-Man doesn't need to handle a fire, right? But then he ends up creating like a surveillance state in New York City by virtue of these spider bots. It's like, you really shouldn't have that much power. And he hires goons and henchmen and whatever, because that's what a supervillain would do. But he hires them and then like gets them to like do good things, right? Like it's yeah. Superior is such a good story, man. You gotta read it. You gotta read it.
I
It's so
plan to.
good.
It's just one of those things that like it's not short,
Hmm.
so I
Hmm.
like I'm having enough trouble. I'm just trying to get through the Dark Forces like trilogy right now, like just
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I wanted to reread it, so it's taken me forever just to get through the first book, and it's like 100 something pages. So
yeah.
I really want to. It's just one of those things where it's like, when am I gonna have enough time to sit down and read this whole thing? So I don't know. I
Yeah.
might just have to bite the bullet and do it in spurts, because I'm pretty sure I have it. I'm pretty sure I bought it digitally a long time ago.
Yeah.
I will at some point.
It's actually
Yeah.
pretty nicely like kind of chunked into volumes. So,
Yeah.
but it is a lot. It is a lot
Yeah. I
to get
remember
through.
it not being short. So.
It's multiple years worth of storylines.
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, you know what? I think we did it. I think the only thing left to talk about is like, we can talk about Wolverine a little bit. We
Yeah.
don't know a lot about this game. At the moment, I think that we know that it's shared universe, that Insomniac is making it, and they made these other Spider-Man games. So, um,
Do we know when its release window is?
I believe it's next year.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that soon. Okay. I
Let me
thought it was
look it
so
up.
far out.
Insomniac Wolverine. Yeah, I think we will see a game. We'll see gameplay at uh, the game of the year.
Oh, Game Awards.
Game Awards.
Wow, really? Oh, I'm actually
I
excited for
guarantee it.
that.
I
I'm
guarantee it.
excited
I
for the Game
guarantee
Awards this year.
we see our first gameplay for Wolverine this year.
Okay, cool.
At that.
I'm gonna hold you to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Is Insomniac still making it? Will it be open world? Is it in the same universe? Insomniac confirms Wolverine game is set in the same universe, and this is from
Cool.
October 27th, 2023. So it is in the same universe. And that is like, this is the one thing in these games that I'm like, okay, guys, like at this point, you have to start bringing this in a little bit more. Doctor Strange does play an influential role in one part of the story in Spider-Man 2. But not actually Doctor Strange. It actually ends up being Wong. But we don't see those characters, even
Right.
though yeah.
The Sanctorum has always been there, though, right? Like
Yeah,
that was
it
in
was
the
in the
first
first game.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it was one of the photo locations in the first game.
Was the Baxter building also?
No,
Okay.
there was something hinting at the Baxter building
Okay.
in the first game, and then in this game you can see that they've purchased the building and they've
Right.
painted the 4 on the top of the
Yeah.
building.
And Avengers Tower was always there.
But Avengers Tower has
Okay.
been there since the first one, and it is
Okay.
Avengers Tower. But I think that in the first game they say that like the Avengers are like off world or something like that, like
Yeah.
they're fighting aliens or something. So yeah, I like in the next Spider-Man game, like whatever they do, they gotta bring somebody in. They just
Yeah.
they have to. But I also said on a recent episode of Off the Record, which is the Patreon exclusive podcast that I do, somebody was asking me like, who do you think deserves the Spider-Man treatment? And I was like, if you did a smaller game like Miles Morales that was Daredevil, like so much of it's already done, right? Because the swinging mechanic is more or less the same. I think you would just like slow him down. He can't move as fast as Spider-Man, but he basically does the same thing. The fighting is all like the same. Like Daredevil is so like from a gameplay perspective, Daredevil is so close to Spider-Man that it's not even funny. But what I said was like the way that you would structure the game, because the Spider-Man games have these things where it's like, okay, and then we're going to be Mary Jane and wander around and collect clues or whatever. I was like, you play through sequences as Daredevil fighting bad guys and fighting crime and whatever, but also like doing stealth stuff to like recover clues for the court cases that you have to try, and then you go in and like there are actual like trial gameplay sequences, like lawyer gameplay stuff, um like Phoenix Wright type stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
Would be such a great game. That would be such a fun video game to play. And you get to play with like the senses and stuff like that. So you get detective modes and that sort of thing with Daredevil. It's like, yeah, man, how is there not an awesome Daredevil video game already?
That's how I feel about Ninja Turtles open world.
Yeah.
Like there needs to be a 4-player co-op.
I pitched
Ninja
that
Turtles
one as
game.
well, but my pitch on that one was using the IDW comics as the basis, and you get rid of the brothers because it's always this thing of like, well, so you're picking different turtles. They tried it with Gotham Knights, which I'm about an hour into and not enjoying. Not a great
I
game.
like that game. I'm not finished with
I
it,
know
but
you
I'm
did. I know
actually
you
enjoying
did.
it.
I can't get past some of the production quality issues that I'm having with it, but you get rid of that by making it a game with Jenica, the fifth turtle from the IDW comics, and you have that like something has happened to the brothers, like they've
Okay.
either been captured or they are off world, because that happens with those guys
Right.
sometimes.
Dimension X.
Yeah, they're in Dimension X, or they're fighting Triceratons somewhere, or they're hanging out with the Ghostbusters, because that is also a thing with that IDW storyline. And you just play as Jenica, and you have to keep the city safe as just one turtle. Would be I like that's how I would do it. But anyways, I go subscribe on Patreon in order to get access to me talking about that at length. I am losing my voice, which I knew was going to happen, and
You made it though. The whole
I
2
did make
hours.
it. I did
You
make
made
it. We made it 2 hours. So, I think that's it. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
I can't wait for whatever we're getting next.
Yeah.
DLC, minigame, Spider-Man 3. I'll wait however long it takes. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm sure that they have something planned, and I think that that is another thing that I think we'll see at at Game Awards.
Do you think we're going to see more Spider-Man stuff at Game Awards?
I think so.
Whew.
I
mean,
think that we'll see. I think we'll see gameplay of Wolverine, and I think we'll get a tease of DLC for
I don't
Spider-Man
know,
2.
man. I think you're a little optimistic.
The
I
thing
want you
is
to be
that
right, but
Insomniac. Well, but okay, but they showed us the first trailer for Spider-Man 2 at Game Awards the same year that they showed us the teaser for Wolverine. Right?
was that at Game Awards?
Yep. Those were
I thought that was Sony State of Play or whatever.
No, I'm pretty sure it was a Game Awards. I'm almost positive
Okay.
it was a Game Awards.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that first teaser for Wolverine was literally just like a slow pan,
Yeah.
or like a slow dolly on a dude sitting at a bar,
Yeah.
and then like claws, and then Wolverine logo.
How
right?
long ago was that? What
that
year
was
was
like
that?
that was like 2 or 3 years ago, dude.
Oh,
It was a while
man.
ago. Yeah.
Wolverine just feels like that game that's like so far off, and maybe it's not. If it's
It's
really coming
not
out
because
next year. Oh,
Insomniac
man.
has more than one studio, right? So like
Sure, yeah.
the it's not the same team working on Wolverine that worked on Spider-Man,
Mhm.
but it is the same parent studio. But the thing about Insomniac is that like they were working on Spider-Man at the same time that they were doing Rift Apart. And I think like the Spider-Man team continues to work on Spider-Man, but like the Rift Apart team is working on Wolverine.
Sure.
And Rift Apart is a Ratchet and Clank game for people who don't
Mhm.
know. And Rift Apart was phenomenal. So like you're like that was like a game of the year contender the year that it came out, right? So like when we say that Insomniac has these two teams, they don't have an A team and a B team. They have two S tier teams, right? Like and then they actually have a smaller team that does like that will do like random projects, right? So like they did that. Was it a mobile game? They did like an indie type game. Obviously, it wasn't an indie because Insomniac is not an indie studio. But like it was just like a small team, and it was just this like little narrative, like sort of 2D indie style game. I can't remember what it was called, but yeah. But Insomniac, like Insomniac and Naughty Dog are kind of, I think, like the two best studios going right now. Like they're the top of the game at the moment. But I have full faith. I have full faith that when Wolverine comes out, whenever it comes out, whether it's next year or the year after, that it's going to be fantastic. But I do think it'll be next year. I think it'll be like holiday next year. I think we're like more like I guess at this point now we're in the end of November. We're about a year away from it, but I think we're probably about 2 or 3 months from DLC for Spider-Man.
All right, I hope you're right.
So in which case they have to tell us about it at Game Awards. Like they have to let us know that it's coming. I think it'll literally be a teaser, and I think it'll literally be Carnage. It'll be like a less than 30 seconds. Like it'll be like a 25-second teaser, and it'll mostly be laughing and then lightning bolt and then like a silhouette of Carnage and then a logo of like Spider-Man 2
Red
Maximum
Symbiote
Carnage
creating
something,
the logo.
right? Like yeah. Whatever the title is, right? It'll be the Spider-Man 2 logo, and then it'll be like a light, like flash of lightning, and then it'll be like blood splatter, but it's not blood, it's symbiote, right? But it'll have that sort of similar effect of like whatever the title is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they just call it Maximum Carnage. Just call it that.
That'd be awesome. I'd be so into
that. Yeah. Cool. Okay, that's it. We did it. Another nerdy conversation in the books. Thanks for listening to ThunderQuack Perfect 10. If you found joy in today's discussion, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast service and leave a rating and review. Want to chat about today's episode? Head on over to our Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Your comments might be used in a future episode. Until next time, remember, it's not about the score. It's about the love. Stay geeky, everyone. ThunderQuack Perfect 10 is hosted by me, Michael Cohen. Follow us on Twitter at ThunderQuackPod, on Instagram at ThunderQuackPodcast, on Facebook at ThunderQuack, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the podcast by heading to patreon.com/ThunderQuack to get early access, bonus episodes, and the ThunderQuack Perfect 10 Pop Quiz. ThunderQuack Perfect 10 is part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.